The UFC has announced the fighter who's going to replace Khabib at UFC 249. It's Justin Gaethje. And I don't think anyone has a problem with Tony Ferguson versus Justin Gaethje in its own right, on its own merits. The problem is that if Tony loses, this ruins Ferguson versus Khabib. This ruins Tony versus Khabib. The historic element of that fight would be weakened if Tony were to lose. If either Tony or Khabib were to lose, rather. Because never in the history of the UFC have two fighters with 12 fight winning streaks in the promotion fought each other. And that's what was going to happen with Tony versus Khabib. If Tony loses, that's gone. So that's bad. Is it worth it? I don't think so. They could have just put on the rest of the card, although it's unclear still whether this will actually take place. Today is April 7th. When I'm recording this right now, it's April 7th. This card is supposed to take place on April 18th. As of now, there's no location for the fight. And there's talks of the UFC buying a private island. I think that's supposed to be for future cards, not really for this card. So for this card, they need to find a venue, and I'm not sure if they can do that. But assuming they do, they could have just had the remainder of the card and just chosen a new main event instead of making Tony Ferguson fight. Now, we don't know. Maybe Tony insists on fighting. God knows what's in his mind. But it's really bad if Tony loses. Because instead of waiting a few months and getting our fight, we insist on holding this event during a global pandemic. And then Tony loses, and that's it. The fight could still happen, but that's the perfect excuse for the promotion to push the McGregor rematch. And then it just messes with the history of it. If he loses, I'm not saying he will. I don't like the fight. It's not going anywhere. They could have held this fight after Tony versus Khabib, regardless of who wins. But they really want to do this, unfortunately. And I'm kind of hoping that the event falls apart so that Tony doesn't risk losing and kind of putting a dent on the gravity of Tony versus Khabib.